Good evening. It's a little after 5:30, so if we could call our subcommittee to order. I know there's meetings after this tonight, and so in the interest of getting people home safely and off to their next meeting. Mr. Clerk, if you could call the roll.
Councilor Broderick,
Here?
Councilor Kennedy,
Here.
Councilor Martin,
Here.
3 present.
Thank you. And this is a Personnel Subcommittee meeting to begin the process of reviewing the goals and objectives. And I think we have another issue that we can take up in addition to it. It's part of that, but maybe separate here as we got different time constraints. Pursuant to the employment contract, I think back in August, there should have been a review. Probably around the time Mayor Murphy and I filed the joint motion on the goals and objectives. There was a lot of other things going on, Treasurer's office and some other things. So obviously it slid. But we should take that up at some point to at least give you a review. And you were kind enough to send out copies. I hope everybody got them, a copy of the employment contract, which talks about a review, compensation adjustment, 1.5% automatic cost of living increase, and then a 1.5% merit increase, which would require an evaluation by the council, and you would have to get successful performance evaluation, which would, by definition, is no less than 75% of the goals agreed to by the parties, meaning the council. I assume you'd agree you met them. And the council is to use a grading system of meets or does not meet expectations. So I think, obviously, we don't have the full council here, but we could maybe acknowledge that we will do that and take that up even if we take it up at a full meeting at some point or sometime when it's convenient to get the full council together, a special meeting or something, at least do that. I think it's important that the review is done so you know where you stand. And also, moving forward, set a process for this. This would have been the first one. Things are a little bit awkward because of the process and the contract versus the ordinance, and it's been cumbersome, I think, over the years as we're trying to bring this to something a little bit more measurable and something we can follow in the future. Did you want to speak?
If I may, Mr. Chairman, it is a little bit, it's been a sort of a balancing in terms of the timing of this to the goals and objectives that we set up were done last January and February. And so there really wasn't, it was difficult to utilize those for the review in August. As you said, there was a number of issues going on in the city at the time, and we wanted to be able to get a year's report to the council on where we were with these goals and objectives, and that really came with the report I gave you back in, I believe it was early December. So I understand the delay in the evaluation. I'm interested in the evaluation and trying to and hopefully meeting the expectations, but obviously hoping that to be in line with what the council is looking at from the operation of the city and from my tenure as city manager. This year in particular, though, given the financial conditions that we've had with the budget and all, we've taken a position on the with the other employees that generally has been without certain salary increases other than those that may have already been built into the contracts and step increases and the like. So I would actually I guess my position for this particular fiscal year is I would defer any of that merit for this fiscal year into the next fiscal year so that I'm not treated differently than the other employees as well. But I am interested in trying to do something for the August timeframe this year, or an evaluation before then, but then we can just sort of roll everything into next fiscal year.
Okay, thank you. So just to be clear, because we're 3/4 of the way through, almost 3/4, right? The way through, you're talking about deferring any merit raise for FY12.
I wouldn't take one for FY12. We would just, if I'm deemed to have met expectations and eligible for that, I would say don't give it to me this year, or we'd push that off into future years.
Okay. So at this point, I don't know if anyone else on the subcommittee wants to speak, but I think that we still well, we need to go forward with the evaluation, but with the understanding that you're going to defer any raise.
Correct.
The same as the unions have agreed to help out as well.
So I think, but as I see it, there's two things to do here. One is, yes, move forward with that evaluation per the contract, but that contract also calls for a new set of goals to be established for
Correct.
the upcoming year. So that, I think, needs to be on our to-do list here as well.
Correct.
Thank you.
And if I may, the process, and I was speaking with before the meeting, that the process that we used last year, I think was a good one in terms of setting up general goals for the city that the administration, the city council can, agree to, and then go to the departments, ask them to participate in this process as well. They run they're part of the organization, and get their input, get council input, pull that together in a document that we can then come back in probably the mid-April timeframe, so that we can then get full buy-in by the council, so that we can include those goals and objectives in the FY13 budget.
Thank you. Now, I guess I have a couple of questions, maybe by way of trying to figure out how we proceed with this. We've got goals and objectives. Obviously, we had the 2011, thank you. And we have the 2012, I guess we call it, that you presented 2 or 3 weeks ago to the full council. I guess my question before we get started, and I think some of us may have the same question, is, okay, we have the 5 categories, let's call it. How do you propose to move forward? One of the goals was use this past year to get a baseline. The old saying is you can't manage what you don't measure.
Right.
How are we going to measure these? Councilor Kennedy and I had this discussion before we started. Is okay. Probably want to set up some goals here in terms of how we want to proceed. What are we looking to do? How are we going to come up with measurable results for government services? Continue to explore. That's pretty tough to come back later on and say you met it or didn't meet it. Right. Is there any information that might be helpful to us? Mr. Herbert is here this evening in terms of, we want to continue the process of consolidating the labor contracts. Is that 1 a year? Maybe that's not a good one to pick, but hearing officer, what's the goal there? Are we trying to, save more money? Collect more money? I mean, how are we going to measure success in some of these categories? I think that might be helpful to start.
Well, it does get difficult in terms of the consolidation of the contracts, and that may not be the best one to use. But just for an example, that's been an issue that I've noted for some time, and one we've been picking away at and working with the unions on, because we're pretty much dealing with 20 years worth of contracts, addendums, memorandums of agreement, and so on, and trying to put them all, side letters, putting them all into one document. We have, a dozen different unions that we're dealing with here, but we're making progress on that. To say 1 a year, really, we should be doing more. We should get them done. I'd like to get them done, this year, all wrapped up, and we're very close to that. So that's, we could say that's one that I think we should say is, let's get that completed. It's done. The issue of the hearing officer becomes difficult to measure because obviously our goal is that, my goal would be that the hearing officer would have nothing to do because people would simply pay the fines and so on. But so I'm not sure exactly how we would measure that success, but we could take a stab at that in some way.
Okay.
I mean, certainly, and if the council has any ideas along those lines,
maybe some of them really can't be measured, so to speak. It's
Right.
just they're going to be the continued effort. The contracts, you may be close, and it doesn't. You can't measure close.
Right.
But there may be some that we can. For instance, let's talk about potentially employee injuries or improved tax title collection. What does that mean? Increased 20% last year over the previous year. So is there a goal for this year? And, and what is it? And what about, the applied for a grant, preventing employee injuries? How many do we have? What is it costing us? Are we trying to reduce that number? Reduce
Right.
the number of claims, the payout? I think some of this might be able to be measured, but not all.
Right, some of those would be. Again, we could have a goal of having, X percent fewer injuries, or get people back to work sooner, based upon the severity of the injuries. You could, with regards to measurable, there could be a certain number of, one technique or tactic that's been used in other communities is the establishment of safety committees, and that are employee-based, with management representation, obviously, that comes up with strategies to deal with workplace safety. You could have a policy handbook prepared. Those are all very documentable. That's a word. Evidence of what's been achieved. But and certainly there are other categories here of how many and I think we have that in here of how many road miles we paved. How many certain roofs that we were going to fix.
Right, and there are a number. It's reduce the property tax levy by $1 million without drawing from free cash or stabilization fund. Those are in the finance, those tend to be more measurable.
Right.
But some of these others, is there a way to do it? Maybe we just have to kind of, do it as we go along, so to speak, and we know what's going on with the negotiations, so
Right.
we can kind of judge you based on that. And I don't know if there's any other thoughts here. Councilor Kennedy?
Yeah, well, I'm new to this committee, and I wasn't here last year, so I wasn't here when this process was done before. But, two goals and objectives that come to mind for me, the macro goal and objective would be economic development. And so I would like to see that beefed up over what is in, over what we had last year, I guess. And then on a micro basis, I think the website for the city needs to be redone. I think it's when because of, for my day job, I end up looking at just about every website throughout the Commonwealth. And there are some that are really good. Lowell's is one of the worst. And people who are in my profession agree with me on that the Lowell website is just very difficult, and the information in some areas, particularly for the assessor's office, is pretty scant at best. And also things like, I don't think there's an abatement form on the website. So if a resident wanted to file an abatement form, they should be able to do that right on the website, just print that out and do, rather than to have to come down here to do it. But that's not available. And so that would be a small one, but those are just two that come to mind.
Sure.
It seems to me that if we're gonna go through this process, and again, I'm new, and so maybe I'm missing something, but I don't see what the point is of having any goals and objectives unless they're measurable. So having them be measurable is an important thing. If they aren't measurable, then why are we bothering to make them a goal and objective? And I don't mean that we should just delete any goals and objectives that we have now, but we need to find a way there has to be a way to measure them, or we need to have a way to measure them. I think that's really important, and I'm not sure that there's a lot of value to the whole process unless you can measure them.
If I may, and Councilor, I agree with you on that. But for instance, on the two examples that you gave, and I agree with both those goals as well. And we're working at, I think we're working at both of those. And like anything, I'm not satisfied with the speed necessarily, but there's a lot of conflicting demands on everyone's resources here. But the measurableness of the website, I suppose, would be a very simple one. Just redo the website. Did he not? Did the administration do it, or were they not able to do it? you know, it isn't necessarily that there'd be the measurableness of, you know, how many hits it got or anything of that sort. It would simply be, was there a revised product? And I'm not sure there's necessarily a way to I agree with you that the website needs work, but then it becomes a case of, you know, one person's idea of if it's improved isn't necessarily another person's idea of whether it's improved. We can put together a website that's completely different that we may think is perfect, but it still may not meet everyone's objectives. But I agree with you on the website. Economic development's a little bit more challenging in terms of how we measure that. You know, we can measure how many leads we track down. We can measure we could even track down how many new businesses locate in the city, although that isn't necessarily always information that's available to us. If it's a new business that, you know, files a certificate with us, we can measure that, or we can identify that. But if it's a new business that takes up, you know, 15,000 square feet in the Crosspoint development, it may not even pick up on our radar that they filled. We have numbers that we talk to them about on a regular basis, and knowing what their occupancy rate is, but we wouldn't necessarily know that business A moved in, business B moved out, or moved somewhere else in the city, something along those lines. But again, I think that economic development has to be a priority, and but we need to find a way to measure how well we're doing at that.
Right. Maybe the website isn't the best example. It just came into my head. And, and I consider that to be sort of a micro thing.
Right.
I don't think it's enough, though, that you could just say, well, we did a new website, so let's check that one off. And that's good. I think that it would be somewhat subjective, and it does matter whether or not everybody, that it's a user-friendly type of website. But there are a lot of websites out there that municipalities use that are user-friendly, and that are way more user-friendly than the one that Lowell currently has.
Right.
In terms of economic development, if Crosspoint gets a new tenant, I don't know that the city administration or that you should get any credit for that, really. I would measure economic development in one way in an increase in square footage, and probably an increase in employment in the city, in new jobs created. Mm-hmm. But when I'm talking about square footage, I don't mean that somebody comes into Crosspoint and leases, 40,000 square feet, and so that's 40,000 square feet. I mean 40,000 square feet of new development, or reused development, if it was mill space, right. That type of thing. But I think that is somewhat measurable, and there's probably a lot of goals and objectives on here that are measurable, some that aren't. Maybe they shouldn't be on here. I mean, there's a lot of stuff here. You know what I mean? Yeah.
There is a lot of stuff, and there's a lot of stuff that's been done, and there's some things that if you go through, and there's stuff that we haven't yet been able to wrap up, that we want to wrap up. The end result is a better city government. But
there may be goals and objectives that are on here, as Councilor Broderick referred to before, that were on last year, where there has been improvement and something's been done. So maybe they don't need to they don't need to remain on this.
Exactly.
And they could be taken off at least for a while. And just.
Excuse me, Mayor Murphy, I'm going to acknowledge in one minute. Mr. Manager, I wonder if there are a number of things here that there's been tremendous progress on, and I think maybe, and I don't want to get to the end of the meeting before everybody speaks, but I'm wondering if maybe part of this process would be to take some of these off that really aren't measurable, that maybe really don't need to be goals. Obviously, it's part of your job, but I think to try and maybe cut it down a little bit, or expand on some things, maybe add some things that are measurable, and maybe what the measurement would be. Some of these are pretty simple. Cut the tax levy by $1 million. Well, we're going to know if you're able to do that, right? I mean, we'll have that budget in 4 months or 3 months or sooner. But some of these, there's been a lot of initiatives and a lot of things that have been done, and a lot of that were begun by your administration, and a lot of progress. Maybe we can remove some of them and make these goals more of the macro versus micro. You know, in other words, we can't, it's not our job anyway to sit and go through each procedure and how, you know, what Facebook, what purpose is and what we're doing with it and what to do on the website and, you know, and all that. I think that maybe we put that back to you to come back and say, okay, this is what our goal is going to be on the website, and then we can, you know, tweak it or agree or whatever we want to do. Is it going to be the number of hits? Is it going to be some type of rating on the user friendliness? I don't know how this technology works in terms of measurements and so on. But that might make sense, because to go through each one of these and start trying to put numbers on it and basically make things up so we can, you know, feel like we're measuring everything, I don't think it's feasible, nor does it make sense.
You know, and I agree with you on that, and it is a challenge, and there's things on here that are just sort of there isn't much here that's just day to day. These are new initiatives, new ideas that we're doing, and there's a lot that goes into that. Setting up a new, you know, a permitting system, setting up, and I'm trying to remember some of these that are in here, but, you know, moving forward with it doesn't even show up here, but the streetlight purchase program that saves $500,000 a year. You know, we take on these tasks that are very time consuming, and we achieve savings, or we achieve efficiencies or better services. And I think those should be recognized in some way as improving city government. Now, the $1 million on the tax levy, I think, is an interesting one. But let's face it, if the most challenging time of all for this administration, and I would say every municipal administration probably around the country, was how we handled the economic downturn of 2008, 2009. We went through that very well. I'd say very well. We maintained services, we found savings, we cut costs, and we did all that. We didn't decrease the tax levy by $1 million or any amount. We kept that steady. But that was a major accomplishment, that we were able to keep it at that, as opposed to coming in. The easiest solution that we could have come in with in 2009 was, we lost $15 million of state aid. You know, let's raise $5 million in additional taxes. But we didn't. We kept that $5 million excess levy capacity all during that period of time, and we worked our way through that, and the city's better off as a result of that. So, I'm all for measuring, and I'm all for goals and objectives, and I'm all for measuring if we can. I don't know. It is a challenge, though, of how we make that happen.
Mr. Chairman. We'll go ahead.
Yeah. Mayor Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was going to speak to that point, that when developing these measures, we have to be also careful that, you know, we're not developing measures for which the manager isn't solely responsible, that there are conditions outside of that contribute to a particular outcome. So things like, you know, working on a website is actually easier to measure. You've either done it or you haven't, but then you can actually look at, you know, I would consider that more of an output. And an outcome from that might be, you know, percentage change in the number of online transactions, so that we're moving, you know, more people to transactions online, so that we're you know, lessening lines down here in City Hall. So I think there are a number of measures that can be objectively looked at, but there are always going to be, of course, those that are subjective and that we couldn't possibly measure without taking into consideration all the factors outside of our control, basically.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I don't think anybody questions that the administration did a good job through the recession. And
I'm not looking for a pat on the back on that either. Thank you.
well, you kind of were.
Well, okay.
But these are these goals and objectives would be going forward, not going back. And so that's what it is the goals and objectives for the next year. What are our expectations? Again, I don't think we need a whole volume of them. I think that if we can cut them down to a much smaller number, then it becomes more measurable and more workable, and probably clearer for you too, and it would just be better for everybody.
Councilor Martin?
Yeah, trying to take, the thoughts presented and come up with potential things to consider for a solution. As to measuring economic development, one thing that occurs to me is new growth. And, but probably as I think about, maybe it's not enough to just measure new growth, because maybe you need to take it, new growth, as a percentage better than the state average or some sort of regional average, if that makes sense at all. Or as, Councilor Kennedy said, square footage of new development is something you can measure, but a lot of what we have is stuff that's going to be redeveloped. There's not a whole lot of brand-new buildings, although, occasionally there are some. And when you talk about the Cross Point example, if, those people are losing tenants and adding tenants as part of their just the nature of their business every day. And probably a good amount of that goes on without any input from the city, but they could land a major tenant that's a result of a lead that's generated by the city, or the city's DPD has worked, to help with some tax credit program to put the tenant in the space. And, but that might not show up in new growth because that's already there. So I think there are all of these kind of macro measurements are going to have flaws probably. Probably you're going to get credit for some things that would have happened anyway, and maybe not get credit for things that the city was integral in making happen. But I think it's still worthy to think about whether something, the overall trend of something is something that can be attributed to the activities of the city manager. And maybe new growth isn't the measure. Or maybe additional square footage isn't the measure. Or maybe number of building permits is not the measure. But there might be something, and I think that's what we're trying to come up with. And certainly with, this contract calls for collaboration back and forth. That's something we can all agree on, right, is measurable and achievable. So I think we all need to give that, some additional thought as to what's appropriate.
Excuse me. It sounds like, or at least to me, or what it appears to me, is that perhaps it would make sense, Mr. Manager, for you to review the goals and objectives that you gave us in December. And not all objectives, goals, not all goals are going to be measurable. Let's face it, you can't measure everything here. But that, I think, is, in hearing others speak, I think that doesn't mean we should remove them, because I think we still may want them on the radar, and there is a way to measure it. Mm-hmm. I'm going to have my opinion as to whether I think you were, trying to get the unions on board, and if you, this year with the health insurance and other things. So it may not have been able to put it down as a goal because you don't know what you're going to get accomplished, and number one. Number two, it may not be a good idea to put it on paper. So I can understand sometimes you can't, set it out, what you want to do, but I think that it probably is a good idea, and, some of these things will be out of your control, as Mayor Murphy mentioned, so I don't think we can hold you accountable that, okay, you said this, and, we realized that state aid got cut by $6 million, but you said you were going to lower the tax levy $1 million, so, that's strike one. But I think some of these maybe could be tweaked. I guess what I'd ask for is if some of these could be maybe outlined or tweaked, and I'm looking at Mr. Herbert because I know this is part of his job, to come back with some ideas as to how we can measure this, because to be fair to you, I'm going to have my own ideas in my head that I'm going to say, geez, well, I think it should be a combination of square footage and jobs brought in, and employment rate. We've seen those, and I think you had that on the screen as part of your presentation. I would look for some kind of combination of that, because I think it's difficult. We don't have that much square footage available in Lowell. I think people forget that. You know, and what do we do have has to be redeveloped, can be very expensive, but we can assist Cross-Point and other existing owners to help maintain their tenancy rate and things like, you know, and we have Cross-Point competing with others, so it's difficult to grab one statistic and try and run with it because people use facts for different reasons and to come up with different results or prove different results. But I think from my from where I'm, you know, the way I look at this is anything that we could come up with some more measurable goals in these. And some of these, quite frankly, might have been achieved, or at least achieved enough now that they're not still on, you know, on the front line. You know, there's been some tremendous progress, you know, with the employee injuries, you know, and tax title collection, you know, improved 20%. You know, is it realistic to improve it 20% again, or do we want to just continue to improve it, but, you know, maybe that isn't in the front line because we're not going to see that kind of, you know, we got the low-hanging fruit there. So I guess that's by way, maybe that's hopefully a better explanation of what I was mentioning earlier. I don't think we necessarily want to just say, oh, that one's done, pull it off. And if it's not measurable, take it off, please. I think we're going to be able to measure it. We will measure it subjectively on our own. But in fairness to you, for you to be able to look and say, okay, I said I was going to do this. Geez, you know, Councilor Broderick thinks this, Councilor Kennedy thinks that. I'm not sure what I need to do here. But go ahead, you.
Well, I was just going to say that this is a document that's pretty much wrapped up in terms of you know, it sort of encompassed what we set up last year, but and I would think that some of them would stay in, the ones that haven't been completed. You know, maybe we sit down and maybe the new council, because it is a new council, maybe the new council says, well, you know what, we don't care about that anymore. You know, maybe we don't care about accepting more streets. I know that's not the case, but you know, so we take that one off. But I assume certainly. You know, Councilor Kennedy's given a couple suggestions here, and I assume other councilors have ideas as well. And certainly, I have ideas that I'd like to see us move forward on. The department heads are giving me their ideas, and this whole thing will be redone, perhaps done in a little bit different format. I'm not sure yet. I do think there's a lot here, and you know, what's interesting is that there's a lot in this document that I gave you back in back in December, and then there's a whole sort of memo that went with that, with summarizing this plus a number of other areas that we made achievements in this year, and that's a credit to the department heads and the employees and you know and so on that made those things happen. So we like being able to bring those out because it's a feather in the cap of the city that you know, we were able to achieve these things. But I agree with you. The things that have been completed here, they're off the table now. We can't keep on coming back and saying, "Oh, we achieved that 5 years ago, and now we want to keep on, you know, grabbing credit for that."
Okay, Mayor Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just going back to the point about you know, some of the measures that may be outside the control of all of us. And in that case, where it's not a sort of straightforward issue that you've either done it or you haven't, I think you can then fall back on really measuring the outputs, on the amount of effort that's being made for things like economic development, so that you're looking, as is actually in one of the goals here, you're looking at you know, how many businesses have been assisted, how many businesses have been encouraged to locate or expand here in Lowell, so that where you can't necessarily determine whether or not, you know, the manager and the administration is fully responsible for all the new growth, although that's also included here as well. You can at least measure the effort that is going into it, so that you sort of hold harmless the administration for those factors, whether it be the economy or the, you know, the real estate market, whatever it is outside that evaluation process.
Councilor Kennedy.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Chairman. I think you're right, Mr. Mayor. I don't think, again, I'm new to this, but it seems to me that you really can't be that rigid about the whole thing. That, you know, it's a very subjective, however any of these are measured, it's going to be somewhat subjective whether or not you were successful or you weren't successful. And so, just at the end of the year, it could be that there were outside factors or influences that made it be that that despite your best effort, you weren't able to meet the objective. And I think you get credit for that, or you should get credit for that. At the same time, items that are removed from here doesn't mean that the city council doesn't care about that anymore. It just means that the city council doesn't see that as being a big problem area. It doesn't mean that it doesn't need to be paid attention to, or you can just throw it aside. It only means that it's not something that really needs improvement really bad. And so I guess I think that would be another reason why you would want to take this and kind of, you know, whittle it down and try to keep it as concise as possible rather than to have a whole bunch of objectives. I mean, you know, there's 8 goals here, and each of these goals have 6 to 8 or 10 bullets. That's a lot of stuff. And some of this it just doesn't mean a lot, I think, and I'm sure that it did at one time, or that there's someone that cares about it, but there's a lot of stuff on here that wouldn't be a goal and objective for me.
And if I may, Counselor, I noticed that you're working off of the memo that I provided. That was sort of a summary of the spreadsheet that was handed out at the time, and that has more discernible and attempted to be measurable products, and that was sort of putting it more into easy reading to outline this. But I understand your point, and certainly because something's achieved, I can assure you it doesn't mean that it's allowed to then lapse. I mean, that's not
right.
I look upon management as not just this, new initiatives, although you need continual improvement of the organization, but I look upon it as sort of stewardship of what you already have there as well.
Right.
Thank you. I guess I would look to see what if there's more input at this point, or if we want to look to what the next step is. If we, in looking, Mr. Manager, because my pages go one way, then I have to turn the page. If you have to flip it. I'm getting old. It confuses me. If it makes sense to Councilor Martin.
Yeah, what I think makes sense is, maybe the manager should have the initiative of trying to come up with a more concise list, but maybe in the report of the subcommittee back to the full council, we should make it known to the other councilors that this is going on, that if there are specific goals or things that individual councilors have, that they communicate them either to the chairman or to the manager, or to the group as a whole, via motion or some other way, just so that we know everybody's significant issues are going to be part of this. But refer this back to the manager for the consolidation that we've all talked about here tonight, and then make it known to the other councilors that have specific things they want to consider, to bring those to the attention to the chairman or the manager.
Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Kennedy.
Yeah, I think Councilor Martin's idea sounds like a good one to me. Maybe if the chairman or the mayor or someone could poll the whole council, have everybody come up with, say, 3 or 5 of their most important objectives. And I would imagine that if they did that, we wouldn't end up with 45, that there's probably a lot of duplicates and triplicates and so forth, and that there might be a more workable number then, and then maybe go forward from there. I mean, it's good if the manager is able to whittle this down as well, but this is supposed to be goals and objectives for the manager from the city council. It is not supposed to be goals and objectives that the manager gives the council on what he intends to do, so.
I agree. I think maybe to take that a step further, maybe by clarification, because Council Kennedy, this may be what you meant, is that we have, is it 8 categories here, Mr. Manager? There's 8 categories for overall objectives that I think we approved or voted on as a council last time we did this. And I have no problem retaining those or keeping those as our objectives. And let me just clarify if Council Kennedy is saying that we ask every councilor to come back with their top 3 goals in each objective? Is that what?
Yeah, three to 5, but I also, I'd remind the chairman that these 8 goals and objectives are satisfactory to you because you were on the council when they were picked. But there are 3 new members of the city council who may have an additional goal and objective that maybe isn't on the list. Maybe they won't, but.
Well, that's what I was trying to clarify. If we're looking for just the objectives themselves, 1 through.
Yeah, it just says, yes.
Or the, I guess, categories or.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I think the goals that we have here, the 8 general goals, are just sort of goal statements. If there's something that's missing in that, I think we've tried to get, sort of think these through and put them in a way. And I think there were a couple that, for instance, I think it was one that a councilor came forward with last year that said, I think we've missed one here, and came forward. I think it was Councilman Donza, and. So, there may be another goal, but there may be objectives that fit into to each one of these goal areas.
Right.
That, that could be put forward or should be put forward.
Right.
If I could just, and I want to just, if I could just go back to one, I understand what Councilor Kennedy was saying about the notion that these are objectives that are handed down from the council, and I understand that. But I also, I do think, as I think Councilor Martin indicated, this is the concept here was one of collaboration, that we would, there's going to be things that I'm going to see that are weaknesses in the organization or areas in the organization that need attention. And I suppose I could just, the goal, I think the idea here is that I would bring those forward and say, this is a weakness that I think we should need to address. And I think it's consistent with the goals of the council. And bring those forward, and department heads, again, are participating in this process as well, and they're bringing them forward. Now, if there's ideas brought forward that council doesn't think are important, doesn't want in there, I suppose that we could just take those out. But I think that the notion here is that the administration, the manager as well as the department heads, and the process that we're setting up here hopefully will last well beyond my tenure as city manager. We're trying to do business differently than has been done in the past by doing this. And, we're fine-tuning it, and we're going through the bumps and the hurdles right now, but this is something that I think we have to look at moving forward. I think that type of approach makes sense and is consistent with what goes on in other communities as well.
Right. I guess, Mr. Chairman, if I could, I guess what I intended was that if every counselor came up and say 3 to 5, the max would be 45, 5 times 9, so it'd be 45. I would imagine it would be less than that because I would bet that Mayor Murphy and I would probably have a lot of the same goals and objectives. And that might be true for, Councilor Laurie and I and a bunch of other things. So maybe you end up with like 30. All right, out of those 30, that doesn't mean that the 30 would stay on the list. All it means is then we would meet with you again. You may have things that you think should be goals and objectives that we don't have, and so it would be a collaborative thing. But I think just to start off as and to have input from all 9 members of the council, that this might be a good first step.
Absolutely.
Not the end step, and it doesn't mean that anything that's not on that list is off the list. It just would be a good first step, it seems to me.
I agree completely, right.
Okay, and I think maybe that's why I was trying to see if I could clarify, because I might have been confusing that with the next level down. It would be, what actions are you going to take, and what's the measurement there? I guess that's where I was looking to say, okay, do we want to get 3 from everybody on each goal, and then, and what are the three steps? What do we want to see? What's most important? Because I think that's where we also roll this into, is the budget. You know, it's one thing to say, okay, we want to improve our economic development. How are you going to do that, and what's it going to cost? And I think we may have to, I think, weigh in terms of, you know, under economic development in this spreadsheet, whatever it was originally, there's, you know, 5, 6, 7, 8 initiatives that you're going to, you know, implement or finish or whatever. And that's what I was referring to is, are we looking for the council to come back with initiatives under each category? Or are we just looking to come in with the broad categories and say, improve economic development, and we'll measure you next year? That's what I was trying to clarify. Does that make sense?
That makes sense to me, Mr. Chairman. I think that again, I think that, you know, there may be councilors that have very specific ideas that we're always interested in hearing and determining, you know, just how feasible it is or what the resources are that need to go into that. But there may be just some general categories where the you know, Councilor Kennedy says, you know, I think there's some problems with the website. We need to work on a website. Well, we'll take that direction, and we'll have a strategy. The administration will put together a strategy of how we make that happen. Yeah, I think it's, again, I think there's a lot of, in this type of thing, there's a lot of overlap of, I want to hear ideas from the councilors, because if they have certain ideas that they know of that work elsewhere, Councilor Kennedy has websites that he likes that he thinks would be beneficial to the city. I obviously want to hear about those. At the same time, there may be just general concepts that we want to, the administration really needs to flesh out how they make happen. So I think goals, objectives, ideas of how we make things happen, and likewise, you know, the administration, I'm prepared to come back and work with you on that. And I think over a series of meetings, this can work out very well.
Because I think the thing with the website, that could fall into economic development. I think Councilor Murphy and I talked about that in the past, is, you know, a way to use that for economic development purposes. You know, if it's more user-friendly and people looking for information, people in the past, I assume, would call up and you'd mail them a packet, or someone would go deliver a packet. People don't do that anymore. They want to be able to, you know, download it and read it right then and there. But it can also be used for, you know, Mayor Murphy was saying, you know, getting people access so they can pay bills online, reduce the number of people that have to come down here, and a number of other efficiencies. It might make sense, and I'm not putting this in the form of a motion, but just seeing if we maybe this kind of narrows it down or gives us the next step, if we ask each council to come up with 3 to 5 goals, and also any specific actions they'd like to see the administration consider or look at doing to achieve them. There may be, each of us has our own idea of what we should do to make the website better, or more economic development, or whatever, as we go through these. And it, you know, and it could be a situation where we can reduce the number of goals from 8 to 5. But I think we definitely should give some feedback in terms of what actions we'd like to see take place, because that's going to roll into our budget, where we want to do performance-based budgeting and budget, you know, in line with our goals and objectives, which I know we talked about. So I don't know if anyone has.
If you make that a motion, I'll second that.
Well, Councilor Kenny can make the motion. A second. Anyone want to be heard on it? All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes yes. So I think we have our next step, and this is going to be a work in progress, and I think it's, you know, last year was the first year we did this, and it was throw everything that, you know, that was important in. A number of these things, I think, were achieved, and I do want to congratulate you on that. I won't give you the performance review right now, but I think that, you know, you should be commended as your department heads as well. And I think, you know, a lot of times that we've come to expect that things will come in on budget. We're not going to have emergencies and issues come up. But, you know, sitting on this side of the table, it's nice to know that we don't, and that we're focused on improvement rather than maintaining. And I think that's you know, that's huge. And sometimes I don't think everybody recognizes that, in that, you know, but we're in a good position thanks to decisions that were made, and the employees, willing to forego raises as well. And I think that we're in a good position to move forward. As far as, I think, the review process, we maybe want to take another vote as to how we're going to proceed with that, or come up with a determination of how we want to proceed. I think what this might call for is some type of vote by each counselor as to whether the manager did meet or did not meet the expectations from the prior goals and objectives. So we could maybe ask the counselors to put that together for the next meeting. Or I'll open it up to the subcommittee here.
That sounds okay to me. I guess where we're going to, and I think we're strapped for time, right? We don't have a lot of time here because we have another meeting coming up afterwards.
I think so.
Yeah, right?
There's a
No.
commission meeting?
No, you're all set with everything got canceled.
Oh, so we're the only fools that came out tonight. That's why no one's here. Okay, Councilor Kennedy.
Well, I guess we should schedule another meeting, and maybe by that time, we could get everything that we need from the whole body, from all 9 city councilors, and then meet again. Does that make sense, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, I think we should probably bring a recommendation forward on it, that each counselor, I don't know if we need to do it in writing, or if we want to, but I think maybe, Mayor Murphy?
Mr. Chair, thank you. I think it makes sense, just because we do have 3 new counselors, and the manager has stated that he's plans to forgo the 1.5% for this fiscal year. That maybe we roll the evaluation process into what the contract actually says for August or September, whichever it is, so that we then the 3 new counselors can evaluate the manager on the last 9 months or 8 months, whatever it is, and then we can have that process in place for the years after.
I don't have a problem with that. Why don't we ask our employee who's entitled to the evaluation, Mr. Manager?
I'm amenable to that. What I will do is I will put in writing my deferral of the, I would like to still go through the process of ensuring that the council is satisfied with the progress that's been made with regards to these goals and objectives, the 75% and, meeting expectations. But that doesn't have to happen right now. It can wait until, as the mayor has recommended, until the July or August timeframe to do that.
Okay.
But I will put something in writing to the mayor and to the council on that.
And then we could just basically follow up on focus in right now on what we want to do over the next year, and so that we have that in place, knowing that the development of the budget is ongoing and happening right now, so that if there are changes, for example, to the goals here, that at least the department heads and the manager and his administration would be able to link those into this year's budget appropriately with enough time.
All right. We're trying to confer quickly here up here in terms of another meeting to take this up. We'll bring in these recommendations for Tuesday night, and then we're thinking the consensus was maybe 3 weeks for the council to put.
Mr. Chair, it might even make sense to put this on the agenda for the special meeting, for the manager's special meeting at the end of this coming month, at the end of March. So that would be the 27th, I believe.
All right. Will that leave us enough time, or will that leave you enough time, Mr. Manager, in terms of you're going through budgets now, or you're going to start getting budgets together, or your department heads? Would you like feedback between now and, say, maybe the 20, whatever, it would be the week before that, to give you a week to get more, fine tune a little bit more?
The sooner we can get that, the better, but I do think that meeting, that's a good use of that meeting. We can discuss some of, if I can get them ahead of time, then we can actually, we can talk about them more if there's more thought that needs to go into it, but then we can do it at that meeting. Then we can, what comes out of that meeting can be, the fine tuning of this document for another meeting of the subcommittee.
I'm sorry, could...
I'll say
Counselor-
that again. What I was saying is, if I can get them a week ahead of time, or thereabouts, the sooner the better. A week doesn't give me a tremendous amount of time. Then we can come into that meeting and we can have a discussion at that time. Then I can take the information, the council can take the information I provide, we can have that collaboration. Then I can come back in April with a more formal document, which would then, we could feed into the budget.
All right, that's what we were discussing up here, that's why I got distracted.
That sounds like a good idea. So 3 weeks, we're meeting with the special meeting with the managers in 4 weeks?
Right.
Okay, so,
Last Tuesday in March. So these motions here would be, or the first motion would be to have the council come back, each council with 3 to 5 goals, and including any specific actions or measurements or suggestions that they would like to see to achieve those goals, and have these submitted back to, I suppose they could go to the mayor?
Sure, they can go directly to me, they can go to the mayor. If I may, this doesn't have to be, I don't think this has to be overly complicated. If councilors get back to me with, or the mayor, with, these are the 3 things I'd like the manager to focus on, the administration to focus on. I think we need to do something about our, the roads in the city, or I think we need to, we can then work that in. It doesn't have to be, I don't think a council has to come back and say, I think we should pave, 15,000 square, linear feet of road this year. All I have to say is the roads, and we can say, okay, this is going to become a priority, or this is how much we think we can afford to do this year, or this is what we can juggle around, and then when we have the discussion on the last meeting in March, we can, we can say, well, this is what we propose to do to address that goal that Councilor Martin raised, or, put together a more formal, I know that Councilor Laurie has talked about this, and I know Councilor Martin has, doing something with a recreation program, or something along those lines. And we can then put together a strategy of how we achieve that.
Okay. I'm going to suggest maybe the mayor, just because it would be easier for the mayor to follow up with us probably than for you to be hounding us for this stuff, saying, Council Broderick, you still haven't sent me your goals and objectives. You might not like what I send you after that. So it might be easier for the mayor to be in charge of getting in what we, be responsible for collecting these. And if we get them to you a week prior to our quarterly meeting, I think there should be sufficient time. Many of these are going to be repeats, and I don't think you're going to see a lot of detail, probably not see a lot of detail, but more in just kind of direction. I think policy type things was what really we're supposed to do anyway.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
sounds good to me.
Okay.
Anything further? Motion would,
Move to adjourn.
Second.
all those in favor? Chair votes yes. Thank you very much.